Hello, Facebook Live. Marcus here. Hello, everybody. It is, what's today's date, though? January 5th, 2021. January 5th, 2021. And hope everybody's having a great new year so far. So I wanted to talk about grass-fed beef, the confusion about grass-fed beef. There is, even a lot of chefs are just really, really confused about this. Even meat professionals, a lot of people are just totally confused. So I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about the differences or what exactly grass-fed beef is and why people are so confused and why even chefs, even some of the best restaurant owners in the country are even confused about this. And some of them are misleading. There's a lot of health benefits, or documented health benefits, depending on who you're talking to, about grass-fed beef. The nutrient content of it, the omega content of it, the environmental impact. There's a lot of supporting evidence that you can find out there of why you would want to eat grass-fed beef versus corn-fed beef. The omegas being the heart-healthy fats being the number one reason. I've read over the years that grass-fed beef has 3 to 4, almost 5 times the omegas as corn-fed beef. Corn-fed beef was something, or grain-fed beef was something that the U.S. started doing in the 60s. They wanted more production. They were feeding the animals excessive grains and other garbage, basically garbage, that would fatten these cows up, and they took them off of family farms and put them into consolidated feedlots. These consolidated feedlots would finish the beef for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days on excessive amounts of grain and not allow the animals any grass access, pasture access. So the beef world changed in the 60s here in the U.S. And then when IBP, Iowa Beef Processors, showed up, they were the very first beef company to the cow to walk in one door and out the other end of the facility in a box, into box beef. Before that, animals would get processed, and they would get shipped. Carcass would get shipped, hanging carcass would get shipped to a breaker. A breaker would be a butcher that had all the facilities to actually break these things down, break carcass. And in New York City, every city had breaking houses. But IBP slowly changed that, and the art of the butcher was gone in a lot of cities, a lot of towns, a lot of stores, where, again, the animal goes in one end and goes out the other end of the facility in a box, ready to go, cut up and everything. Before that, breaking houses were very popular. I don't even think New York City has a breaking house left. So the beef world has changed drastically. So people are trying to get back to the old days of beef, where beef was pure, natural, no hormones, no antibiotics, grass-fed, on family farms, on pastures. And that is the allure of what people want to eat. It's not the reality of really what's going on. So I want to just break this down for a few moments on what really is the definition of grass-fed beef and why people are so confused, especially chefs. And even Tom Colicchio. Tom Colicchio and I had a round about this on Twitter back in 2009, 2010, when I pointed out to him that his restaurants were indeed misleading people on the grass-fed beef. And I actually spoke to his chef, his manager, his butcher, and they all swore to me that they were serving grass-fed beef. And I said, you're not. This is the beef you're using, and it's not grass-fed beef. You're misleading your guests. And this is Tom Colicchio, one of the most famous chefs in the country. I said, you're misleading your guests, and this isn't right. This is basically fraud. And I pointed out to you, I've done the research for you. I've handed you everything. And over 8 phone calls, they told me that I was the one who was crazy. Well, I put it on YouTube. I called the Grass-Fed Beef Association. I said, how in the world can Tom Colicchio get away with something like this? Like, doesn't anybody police menus, don't they? And they're like, honestly, nobody really polices menus like they should be policed. Certain states, certain industries, yes, they're more policed, like seafood in Florida. But for grass-fed beef, it's not. Nobody's really policing grass-fed beef. So, I just have to shoot a quick message here. Jamie, if you're watching, come over. So nobody's really policing. So I said to one of the high members of the Grass-Fed Beef Association, I said, American Grass-Fed Association, I said, what can you do? And they go, Marcus, you've done a lot. You've already called them. You've talked to their manager. You've talked to their chef. The next step, the only thing you could do is possibly throw a video up on YouTube and call them out publicly. And I said, great idea. I have no problem doing that. I'll call out Tom Colicchio. So I put up the video. Then I tweeted him the video. And then all of a sudden I start getting, hey man, I can't believe you're doing this to me. Why would you do this? And then all of a sudden on private messages, then all of a sudden on publicly on Twitter, he says, thank you for catching our typo. And I tweeted back, I caught your typo 8 months ago and you guys refused to catch it and acknowledge, and I laid back into him. And then he sends me messages, I'm done playing games with you. You don't know who you're messing with. This is all from Tom Colicchio. You don't know who you're messing with. I'm done playing games with you. All that kind of stuff. Needless to say, they changed the menu, and then the chef put out an apology saying that the hotel accidentally mistyped their menu because it was at a casino. They mistyped their menu and this and that. And bottom line was it got changed, but it took several months and lots of phone calls and me putting it up on YouTube and calling them out on it. So, with that being said, the reason why, and when I spoke to their butcher it was Craft Steak, I believe, Tom Colicchio's restaurant, Craft Steak, he told me that he grew up on a farm and that all animals eat, all beef, all cattle eat grass, and thus they're allowed to call it grass-fed. Now that is 100% correct. That is 100% correct. All cattle grow up on grass, right? All cattle are on grass, but you're not allowed to call it grass-fed because of the next step that happens. Beef goes through 7 processes of, or 7 steps. You have the first person who's the calfer. So, and I've been on the farm. I've been with calfers. I learned all this in Colorado when I was really in depth with the beef world, like beef cattle production. So the very first step is the calfer. All right. So the calfer is the guy who impregnates the cows. They give birth, and they keep this for, I don't know, they keep this for a month, the baby, 2 months, 3 months. They keep it for a certain amount of time. Then they typically will sell this off to, because they're not feeders, they're not finishers, they're not processors, they're not marketers, they're not end product people. These guys are just geared for just calving. That's all they do is their animals just make babies constantly, and that's all they do. That's what they have facilities for. So they quickly sell this baby off to a mid feeder. Somebody who's just going to put this thing on grass and let it go out there for 4, 5, 6 months, eat grass. They're not going to put in typically any grain in this animal because their goal is to spend as least money as possible to get that cattle to the next level. All right. Now there might be two mid feeders where they might be on grass pastures in 2 farms or in 2 facilities, 1 or 2, depending upon this step and how it's consolidated. But the ultimate goal is to get this animal to a certain age where it can then go to a feedlot or a finisher. Now, up until this point, this animal's typically only eaten grass, all right? Because again, these mid feeders do not want to put any excess money into raising these cattle. Now, the finisher or the consolidated feedlot, these are the people who buy these, again, probably from auction. You can go to the auction, any day of the week in these cattle states and just buy as much cattle as you want and just stick it into a feedlot. So already this cattle's changed hands three times, right? 3 times it's already changed hands. And now we're going to a consolidated feedlot where these animals are going to be pumped with hormones, antibiotics, because they're going to be getting sick because they're in close confinement. They're not going to be on grass pastures, not going to get the nutrients from the grass, and they're going to start being fed grain. And these grains, and sometimes the stuff that they feed these cattle is little garbage, because cattle eat it. You can put a lot of stuff into that feed, and they just do a slow dose of antibiotics, as antibiotics make these cattle grow bigger. So the name of the game in the finishing lot, in the feed lot, in the consolidated feed lot, is to get as much weight onto the cattle as possible, not have healthy cattle. The goal is weight gain. And when you take a cattle off of grass and change their diet and put it onto grain and other kind of garbage, the cattle becomes extremely unhealthy and gains all this weight. but yet in the beef world, we think more fat in beef is better quality, better this, better that, and then we're going to pay more for it when the animal is really getting sick and on its way to being diabetic, heart disease, all these things that this animal is now manifesting. We as consumers, we've been trained to think, oh, this is a healthy animal because it's fat and plump and more fat in it. And that's obviously not the case. So from here, the cattle now goes into the processing. Sometimes that feedlot is the processor. Sometimes that feedlot is not the processor. So now the animal goes to another step where it actually goes into the processing plant onto a kill floor where it gets processed. All right, and that's where Iowa beef processors change the whole game, and they basically cow walks in, goes out in a box. So that is how most are set up right now. So now we're at another stage. Now the person who is actually packing the beef into the box typically might not be the person selling the beef. Now it goes to a different person to actually market, sell it, brand it. Can be a whole different brand put on it, all these kinds of things. And then of course it goes to a distributor, then it goes to a restaurant, then it goes to the end consumer. So beef just changes hands so much that the chef actually serving the beef has no idea, or very, very little idea, unless they're buying from a farm directly and they know and they have and they gap all that and they understand what's going on, that they can really say, hey, this is really grass-fed beef, or this is really, this is where this beef is coming from. Now the confusion is that a lot of farms or a lot of finishers will finish cattle, so that finishing process, which is the feedlot, will finish them on a pasture. So they don't go into a typical feedlot. They'll go on to grass pastures, and they'll be fed excessive amount of grains on the grass pasture, but they're able to be free roaming, basically. They're able to be out on grass, they're able to be on pasture, they're able to be out on what appears to be a real farm. And on this real farm, there's grass access, but there is grain on that finishing process to plump the cattle up. This is where the cattle may not need hormones and antibiotics because they're not being crammed together. They're not getting sick together. They have more space. I don't know if it's adequate space, but they have more space to properly do their thing. So they're not being confined and getting sick. So this is where the natural beef movement happens, where it's still being grain fed. It still has a little bit access to grass. They're not being as packed in as much as they still are. They might not be given hormones or antibiotics, or if they are given hormones or antibiotics, they might be weaned off of them 30 days before processing, and then 1 or 2 carcasses tested per 100, and then the whole batch is passed as hormone-free or antibiotic-free, which is very real, and that happens. So when you buy beef that's hormone-free, antibiotic-free, you want to buy something that was a never, ever, ever program, never administers hormones, never administered antibiotics, because they can wean them off and still call them hormone-free and antibiotic-free because there's no residue in 1 or 2 carcasses out of 100 and the whole batch is passed. It's literally this conversation I've had with these beef producers before, so that's very, very, very real. Now, so chefs get confused. So there's like this one company called Pinelands Beef. Pinelands Beef is a beef company that started in Maine. Now Pineland Beef, a lot of restaurants serve their burgers because a few distributors have their burgers in New York City. So I argued with Woody's All Natural for several years over the burger place over in Cornwall because they were serving this beef and they were calling it grass-fed. And I said, it's not grass-fed, guys. You cannot market this as grass-fed. It is indeed consolidated feedlot beef. If you go onto their website, you will see they raise on family pastures, but then at the next stage, it goes to the finishing plants, where there's one in Pennsylvania, there's one in Maine, there's one like in Iowa, wherever, Mississippi. They have certain plants on throughout the Northeast here that they finish their beef on, and it specifically says it in their thing. And Tom Colicchio, he argued with me, or their guy argued with me, their butcher, that, well, this stuff is Snake River, and it's this and that. And I go, but if you go into the Snake River website, you will see, and this was before Snake River had a grass-fed line, you will see it says, all cattle move to a consolidated feedlot at 14 months and finish for 4 months on grain. It's right on their website. Now, here's this exact definition or the specification that differentiates grass-fed versus grain-fed beef, all right? As soon as the animal starts eating grain, As soon as you switch it, not even switch it, but as soon as you introduce grain into its diet, even if it's still eating grass, you're not allowed to call it grass-fed. The American Grass-Fed Association, that's not in their definition. That's not even in the USDA's definition of grass-fed animals. They're only allowed to eat grass and dried grass like hay, dried alfalfa. They're not allowed to eat grain. The first day they're given grain, the first instance they're given grain, they're declassified as grass-fed. Now, so some chefs think, well, I'm buying from Pineland Beef. You go onto their website, it shows grass pastures, it must be grass-fed. Small family farms, it must be grass-fed. A lot of websites, a lot of companies give that misleading. You have to actually dig into the website to see more of, well, how's it being finished? Now, those are just pictures of mid-feeders with it on the grass, is all those are. The mid-feeders, the guys who buy from the calvers. Sometimes the calver and the mid-feeder are the same person, depending upon the size of the farm and what they're capable of doing. So this is where chefs get really, really confused. And I got to tell you, if you look up Pineland Beef and look up all the places they sell beef to and call these places, probably 75% of the stores and restaurants will tell you that it's grass-fed beef, and indeed, it's not grass-fed beef. And I'm not saying Pineland's a bad brand, but there's just a lot of chefs don't understand what they're serving. A lot of DeCicco's. I did one day. I called all the DeCicco's because DeCicco's sells Pineland. I called like 4 or 5 of the DeCicco's locations, and only one store out of all of them told me indeed that it was grain finished. All of them swore up and down that the beef I would be buying there, and I was on the phone, beef I'd be buying there was grass-fed beef. And this is the Chico's Market. All right, so people are really, really, really misled on this. So chances are, if you've gone out to a restaurant and you've ordered grass-fed beef, there's a big, huge chance that it's not been truly grass-fed beef, that does not have the omega profiles, the nutrients, all that kind of stuff that it's supposed to be having, that you're supposed to be led on to believe that it has, are not in that beef. So it's simple as that. First day of grain, declassified, no longer grass-fed. Now, if it's on a family farm, like for example, like our burgers come from a farm in Dutchess County. They are feeding them grain while they're on grass. We do not advertise these as grass-fed burgers. The ribeye steaks that we serve from a different source are true grass-fed, grass-finished, grass, 100% grass, right? So the other stuff that we're buying, the burgers that we're buying, we list it as pasture-raised. It's listed as pasture-raised. And I tell people, it has access to grain. They feed the animals grain once a day. That's just what they do. But they eat grass all day long and eat grain. But I can't mislead people and tell people that's grass-fed beef. But the average chef will tell you that's grass-fed beef, and it is totally 100% not true. So that's how that works. Hope this video has helped anybody along this process, and I hope if any chefs see this video that they understand that it's fraud. It's fraudulent to say that something is something that it isn't, because a lot of guests are specifically eating food because of its benefits. Certain people are eating food because they have allergies to things. All right, so it is our responsibility as chefs to be 100% transparent and truthful with what we are serving. That's what we have to do as chefs. People trust us to do that. And if you're a chef that's not, a guest said to me the other day, said, Marcus, like all this stuff you store in your brain, like how do you comprehend all this stuff? Because you can have a conversation on vinegar, on this and that and this. As a chef, as a restaurant owner, somebody who's responsible for serving food, I need to know of what I'm serving. And if I don't know, I don't feel that I'm a good chef. I don't feel that I'm a good business owner. And I think that with any business that is selling something, you need to understand and know everything that you're selling. I don't want to go into medicine here, but I was at a doctor's office recently getting blood work done and this and that, and the PA at this doctor's office, of course we got into talking about the corona vaccine, the COVID vaccine, and this PA at this office goes, I refuse to give the vaccine. I'm going to leave that up to the doctor because I don't know enough information on the vaccine to give it. I don't want to be the one responsible for telling somebody false information. it's brand new. I know not much about it. Not many people know about it. And I'm not going to be the one to say, here, this is this and this, and then them come back to me a week later, 2 months later, and say, why did you mislead me? Why did you lie to me? I'm not going to be that person. And I feel that as a business owner, with whatever you're selling, whether it's medicine or whether it's food or whether it's a car or whether it's clothing, you need to understand what's going into your product so you can properly represent your product. So I've spent the last 22 years researching food, because I care about what I'm serving. I care about what I'm eating, and I'm not the chef. I'm not the restaurant owner who's actually going to go to Whole Foods to buy for my family and then turn around and buy the cheapest possible food for you to eat. This for me is a passion-based business. This is, I'm doing what I love, and what I love is what I'm serving. So for me, that whole connection is there. Jamie and I, that's what we do. And that's why it doesn't feel like work a lot of times, because we love what we do, and we do. Our restaurant is a direct. Somebody asked me once, what is the success? Or I saw a question. What is the success? What is this classified as a successful chef? And another chef once said, I heard a chef say this: the chef's restaurant is an extension of himself. And I hope that anybody who's been at the restaurant here knows that and feels that this restaurant is totally an extension of ourselves. Jamie and I are very strict about not buying big brands. So we don't buy Absolute vodka. We don't buy Grey Goose vodka. We don't buy this stuff. And if we go out to eat somewhere and we go to order a cocktail and it's a big brand, we just simply say, I'll skip. I'll look for something else to drink. I want to know where my money is going, whether I'm buying it in my restaurant or I'm out on my personal time, where that money is going to this place that I personally believe in. So I wouldn't expect not to serve Grey Goose and all the big brands here, and then me turn around and go to restaurants and order all these big brands. I don't do that. We don't do that. This restaurant is an extension of our beliefs and our passion. And maybe that's why I know all about beef and chocolate and salt and salmon and all these kinds of things, because it's our true passion of pure, real food. All right, that is it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Share this video with a chef. Share this video with anybody in the food industry. Share this video with people that are concerned about what they eat. That is the exact definition. That's the exact rundown of grass-fed beef. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. And if you want more information, AromaThyme, THYME, Bistro, BISTRO.com. Talk to everybody later.